Today on the Ben Shapiro Show, a black man kills a white woman, and of course the media are totally uninterested. Plus, war in Ukraine continues. What is the Trump administration going to do? The left very, very upset with the blowing up of a Tren de Aragua drug boat by the Trump administration. And we'll get to the Democrats. Who will their 2028 nominee be? A big candidate just said he's not going to run. First, today is a huge day at the Daily Wire. Many of you already know Isabelle Brown. Soon, the entire world will. The Gen Z conservative voice America has been waiting for. The Isabelle Brown Show premieres today on Daily Wire Plus. But that's just the start of a huge week here at Daily Wire, because Wednesday, for the first time in months, all of us are getting back together to celebrate a decade of the Daily Wire by debuting our new flagship show, Friendly Fire. We'll be debating, disagreeing, discussing all the news making headlines right now. Spoiler alert, we all have our own opinions. Wednesday night, you will hear all of them collide. The first episode is a celebration of our first decade. We'll have major announcements, some you've been waiting for, some will be complete surprises. Don't miss a moment. Join now at dailywire.com. Well, folks, it's become perfectly predictable at this point. Let's say that there's a violent incident, an incident in which a black person and a white person get into conflict. Let's say it's the white person who ends up killing the black person, even in a situation where the black person was actually performing an aggressive act and the white person was acting in defense of self or others. Say the Daniel Penny situation. We get months of talk about white on black violence. If it's Michael Brown, months, years of talk about white on black policing crime. Derek Chauvin, George Floyd. This is just the way it goes. If, however, the crime is in reverse, if it is a black perpetrator and a white victim, then of course it just disappears into the ether and we never hear about it again. The latest case of this happens to be this horrifying video out of North Carolina. According to the New York Post, haunting new video revealed the terrifying moment a homeless ex-con allegedly fatally stabbed a 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee in what police said was a random attack on a Charlotte light rail train. And the video is available. It's horrifying, so that is your warning. If this sort of thing really disturbs you, which it probably should, you can fast forward about 30 seconds.
Please stand clear. Doors are closed.
See, there's just a woman, and she's looking at her phone. This is a Ukrainian refugee. And behind her, sitting on this light rail train, is a violent black man. He proceeds to take a knife out of his pocket, and then he gets up and he just stabs her directly in the neck and kills her. We can actually show that part, and he's covered in blood, walking around the train. Everybody else is just trying to not get killed. Some of them don't even notice what happened, it looks like. And then he walks off the train. Her name was Irina Zarutska. She fled Ukraine for a safer life in America. She was on the Lynx Blue Line just before 10 p.m. August 22nd when she was ambushed, according to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. The surveillance footage shows Zarutska boarding the train in her pizzeria uniform at 9:46 p.m. and sitting looking at her phone, unaware of the danger behind her. Just 4 minutes later, 34-year-old DeCarlos Brown Jr. allegedly whipped out a folding knife and lunged forward, stabbing her 3 times, at least once in the neck, according to the police. Apparently, he then walks through the rail car, stripping off his sweatshirt and waiting by the doors, and then the passengers begin to notice the blood that is dripping from him. Zarutska, who grabbed her neck as blood spilled onto the train floor, collapsed in her seat, was pronounced dead on the light rail. He apparently got off at the next stop. A folding knife was later recovered near the platform. Now, there are a bunch of issues here. The first issue has nothing to do with race. It has to do with the fact that our criminal justice system does not keep criminals in prison for long enough. I know this cuts very much against the left-wing view that we are an over-incarcerated society. Wrong. We're a radically under-incarcerated society. By this, I do not mean that we need more random misdemeanor offendants in jail. I mean that if you are arrested for armed robbery, you should be in jail for the rest of your life. You should not be let back out on the streets. This idea that you stick somebody in jail for 3-4 years, especially if they are a homeless, mentally ill person, which is what this person was, and there's no involuntary incarceration available with regard to mental illness, no involuntary commitment available. Well, what you end up with is crime on the streets. This idiocy where we arrest career criminals, we take them off the streets for 5 minutes and we put them back onto the streets is insane. It's totally ridiculous and insane at every possible level, and it gets human beings murdered. It gets them murdered. And the judges who do this sort of stuff, who give light sentences, the systems that allow for this sort of stuff, this catch and release nonsense, they need to be ended, and they need to be ended immediately because they are horrifying. Horrifying. So that is issue number one, because as it turns out, totally unsurprisingly, this particular perpetrator has multiple arrests dating back to 2011, His record includes larceny, robbery with a dangerous weapon, and communicating threats, according to court records obtained by the New York Post. He is homeless. He once served 5 years in prison for robbery with a deadly weapon charge. In January, he was arrested and charged with misusing 911 after a police welfare check. During that incident, officers said he bizarrely claimed a man-made material inside his body was controlling him as he ate, walked, and talked, according to an affidavit cited by the outlet. So, no involuntary commitment. He was not put in a mental health facility. No jail. Nothing to keep this person away from innocent civilians just walking around and trying to take the train. Okay, so issue number one. Evil people need to go to jail forever. Forever. They should not be out. There's a very, very high recidivism rate with regard to violent crime. And this notion that you are simply going to let people out of prison again out of some sort of misplaced sympathy is insane. And it does have externalities. It gets people killed. And we see cases like this, by the way, on a frequent basis. There's another case that was reported by the New York Post just recently, pointing out that a Georgia daycare worker who allegedly beat a 1-year-old boy black and blue was released on bail. According to the New York Post, a daycare worker in Georgia who was charged last month for allegedly beating a 1-year-old until his face was black and blue was released after posting bail. The offender, 54, was let go on a $44,000 bond on August 16th after she was charged with 3 counts of first-degree child abuse and 1 of first-degree aggravated battery. Totally insane, obviously. The pictures of the child, and he's a 1-year-old child. The kid is basically mutilated. I mean, she beat the living hell out of this kid. You're looking at cuts on his face, black eyes, and everything. The offender was arrested August 11th after a family at the Little Blessings Childcare in Bainbridge, close to the Florida border, reported their 1-year-old's grisly injuries suffered at daycare one day. The tyke looked into the camera lens the best he could as one blackened eye was nearly swollen shut. He had a litany of bloodied scrapes along his cheeks and around his mouth as well. I mean, it looks like she beat the living hell out of him. The offender said that originally this kid had been beaten by another kid with a plastic toy, but then surveillance video showed an adult, a 54-year-old adult, walloping the son, let out on bail. No problem. This system is broken and needs to be fixed. That is first off. Then you get to the racial angle. The racial angle is less about race and more about media coverage of race. When I say it's less about race, the reason I say that is because there are some people who attempt to turn this into some sort of salient point about the difference between races. Okay, let's be very clear. Crime is a result of individual evil human action. It is not inborn into any race. Those who make this claim are silly. What you have in a lot of areas are different cultural orientations toward crime. This is just a reality. If you don't have fathers in the home, you end up with high crime areas. If you have people who see other criminals around them acting like criminals, they act like criminals. This is true regardless of race. And what is a racial angle here? And by the way, I should point out here that virtually all crime is intraracial rather than interracial, meaning that, yes, there's far more, by proportion, black on white crime than white on black crime, but the vast majority of crime is white on white and black on black. Okay, with that said, the media coverage is always radically disparate. If a white person commits a crime against a black person, it is a national news story. If a black person murders a white Ukrainian girl on the train in Charlotte, it gets zero mainstream media coverage. Zero. The New York Times has not covered it at all as of today. At all. Liz Wheeler points out that the New York Times dedicated some 6,000 articles to George Floyd, some 1,200 articles to Trayvon Martin, some 56 to Kilmar Abrego Garcia, some 100 to Daniel Penny, and 0 to Irina Zarutska. And it is not out of line to point out the radical disparity in attention that is paid with regard to these headlines. I mean, you can tell this with the legacy media all the time. Whenever there's a white on black crime, the race of both the suspect and the perpetrator is mentioned. Whenever it is a black on white crime, neither race is mentioned. That's extraordinarily typical in the legacy media. And the reason, if you ask people who work in the legacy media, is they say they don't want to, quote unquote, reinforce stereotypes. Well, actually, the only stereotype that's being reinforced when you don't report the news is that the legacy media are trash and they're not giving you the full information. Donald Trump Jr. points out, quote, strangely, all the clowns with Ukraine flags in their bio are also all silent on this one. And what he means by that is that many of the people who have the Ukraine flags in their bio are people who are very liberal, people who are very much oriented against the Trump administration. But when a Ukrainian woman gets killed on a subway by a black man, well, then it turns out that the intersectional hierarchy has been upended, and so they have to ignore. And he's not wrong about that. Okay, bottom line here is this. As always, legacy media are perfectly willing to overlook stories that do not match their narrative. It is narrative uber alles. It is the narrative above all. And the death of this young woman will not become a national issue. It will not spur a national conversation about crime rates or about policing or about people getting out too early on bail. It won't do any of those things because it doesn't match up with too many in the legacy media and what they wish the world were really all about. Already coming up, the president of the United States authorizes blowing up a Venezuelan drug cartel boat, and a bunch of people, including Rand Paul, are very upset about it. Plus, we introduce you to Isabelle Brown. She has a brand new show here at Daily Wire. That's exciting stuff. It's our first big show launch in a couple of years. First, when inflation jumps, when you hear the national debt is over $37 trillion, you ever think, hey, maybe I should go buy some gold? Well, it turns out a lot of people are thinking that these days because diversification is a smart strategy. Whether to protect against the dollar's loss in purchasing power, for peace of mind during global instability, or just for sensible diversification, Birch Gold Group believes every American should own physical gold. And so along with the Daily Wire, Birch Gold created something special this month. Through September 30th, if you buy from Birch Gold, you will get a signed copy of my brand new book, Lions and Scavengers, plus your very own golden Ben Shapiro bookmark. We release an extremely limited quantity of the autographed books and bookmarks. Text Ben to 989898, claim your eligibility, and start the process. Plus, Birch Gold can help you roll an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. You are still eligible for a signed copy of Lions and Scavengers. I buy my gold from Birch Gold, so do tens of thousands of other Lions. Is it finally time you did the same? It's really easy. You call them up, ask your questions, make your best purchase, and then when you're done, you got gold in your safe, the way I do. Text my name, Ben, to 989898. Claim your eligibility today. Act before September 30th. Again, text Ben to 989898. Also, finding that right hire can drag on for absolutely months. You're waiting for decent candidates to apply, or you have too many resumes. You're chasing down people who aren't even really interested in the job anymore. What should be straightforward turns into a frustrating cycle of waiting and sorting. The future of hiring looks a lot better than that because ZipRecruiter's latest tools and features help speed up finding the right people for your role, so you save valuable time. Now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ziprecruiter.com/dailywire. One thing that really stands out about ZipRecruiter is how quickly you can connect with the right people for your team. When you see a candidate that catches your eye, you can unlock their contact information right away instead of waiting around or jumping through hoops. Plus, with over 320,000 new resumes being added every single month, you're constantly getting access to fresh talent. That means you can fill those open positions a lot faster than you'd expect. Use ZipRecruiter. Save time hiring. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get that quality candidate within the first day. If you go to ziprecruiter.com/dailywire right now, you can try it for free. Again, that's ziprecruiter.com/dailywire. ZipRecruiter is the smartest way to hire. All right, meanwhile, the other controversy that broke out over the weekend concerned the United States destroying this speedboat filled with drugs that was coming from Venezuela. So, as we talked about last week on the show, the United States military blew out of the water a Venezuelan drug boat. And a lot of people are upset about this, apparently. And by a lot of people, I mean every Democrat and Rand Paul, which, again, not super shocking. The subject of this dispute, of course, was the Navy sinking a Venezuelan boat in the Caribbean September 2nd. The military said it carried 11 members of the crime gang Tren de Aragua smuggling drugs. President Trump said on social media he ordered the strike to prevent drugs from reaching the United States. The Vice President, J.D. Vance, he tweeted out, killing cartel members who poison our fellow citizens is the highest and best use of our military. I feel like it's a pretty good use of our military. I think the Vice President is right on that. The question a lot of people are asking is whether we should have simply sent the Coast Guard to board them, as we very frequently do with drug traffickers, as opposed to simply blowing up the boat. And the administration, all they really have to do at this point is provide some defense suggesting these folks were armed or they suspected they were armed. They didn't want to risk the lives of American Coast Guard members. And thus, they used deadly force. Okay, Rand Paul, who, again, is quite isolationist on foreign policy. And you'll recall from making a gigantic speech during the Obama administration about the droning of terrorist Anwar al-Awlaki, because al-Awlaki happened to be an American citizen who was an actual terrorist abroad, and Obama droned him. So Rand Paul says, JD, I don't give a bleep, Vance, says killing people he accuses of a crime is the highest and best use of the military. Well, no. He says killing people abroad who are drug traffickers and members of Tren de Aragua abroad. These are not American citizens even. This is like a step even down from what Rand Paul was saying about Anwar al-Awlaki, is the highest and best use of the military. And then he says, did he ever read To Kill a Mockingbird? Okay, this is just beyond parody. I'm sorry. Now Rand Paul has brought himself into the world of the parodic. And again, when it comes to domestic spending, I like Rand Paul. When it comes to foreign policy, I think that he is misguided, to say the least. Did he ever read To Kill a Mockingbird? Well, To Kill a Mockingbird is the story of the criminal defense of a black man wrongly accused of rape in the Jim Crow South. I'm not sure how that's the same thing as Tren de Aragua members aboard a speedboat carrying cocaine. Pretty sure that's not the same in international waters. Like, that doesn't match up particularly closely. Said, did he ever wonder what might happen if the accused were immediately executed without trial or representation? And these are not American accused. In America, you couldn't just, blow them up. That wouldn't be a thing. What a despicable and thoughtless sentiment it is to glorify killing someone without a trial. Well, no. If they're posing a threat to the homeland, if they're members of a terrorist gang, and we kill them, I think that's probably okay. Certainly we have the international law authority to do so, by the way. In international waters, the United States does not have some sort of burden to board the ship. And you may not like the decision that was made. You may ask for some sort of justification for why they didn't attempt to board the ship. But the idea that you have to bring these people in and then give them an American trial, that's not true. Just by even international law, even maritime law, that's not true. J.D. Vance was responded to by Brian Krasenstein, of course, a left-wing commentator over at X, said, killing the citizens of another nation who are civilians without any due process is called a war crime. And J.D. Vance wrote back, I don't give a bleep what you call it. Which, okay. I mean, honestly, point to J.D. Seriously. I kind of agree with this. Like, this idea that if you just label things a war crime, that makes them a war crime is quite silly. And war crimes typically have a long and storied history with actual definitions. No, it is not a war crime to blow a drug boat out of international waters steaming toward your shores. That is not actually a war crime. Well, it wasn't just Rand Paul who was upset about this. It was Democrats. Now, I got to say, Democrats are they're so damned incompetent politically. It really is incredible. Like, Democrats believe they're going to somehow make hay out of this. They always go too far. Instead of just saying, listen, is it legally questionable, the president blowing up this boat? It seems legally questionable. Probably we should find out from the administration whether they actually thought that there was a threat to the national security sufficient to justify violent action as opposed to an attempt to stop and board the boat. Right? That would be a well-calibrated response. You know, it's not a well-calibrated response. Jerry Nadler suggesting criminal charges for Americans. Like, what? What? Jerry Nadler, straight from Elf on a Shelf.
This newest outrage where they just bombed a speedboat, which they asserted was carrying terrorists. So you're the judge, jury, and executioner when you're not in a time of war. For that, the president ought to face criminal charges.
Criminal charges. Okay, so we blow up a drug boat filled with Tren de Aragua members, and the Democrats are like, the president should face criminal charges. Keep going with this, guys. Like, really? You want to campaign on defending Tren de Aragua? Have fun with that. Cory Booker, who still misguidedly thinks that he is going to be president of the United States, which is astonishing. And he is the most phony person in the entire world, Cory Booker. That dude is more inauthentic than Cheetos. It is insane how inauthentic Cory Booker is. Did you see his engagement pictures, Cory Booker's engagement pictures? Everybody's making fun of these engagement pictures because they are ridiculous. He looks as though he was hired to do some sort of Cialis commercial. That's what it looks like in his engagement photos. There is not a straight man on earth who has ever looked like that in an engagement photo. Like, just not. Not saying anything about Cory Booker there. Or am I? But yeah, it's a look. Anyway, so Cory Booker is very upset also because if he pops in his angry eyes, he thinks, then the more he I call him Mr. Potato Head because he kind of goes from normal to, then his eyes pop out of his head. And then he puts on his angry eyes and starts ranting about. So he's ranting about the president blowing up a cartel boat.
Do you think that the president has the authority to unilaterally strike a boat carrying alleged drug smugglers?
No, he doesn't. It is a massive expansion of presidential authority against the rules that abide by the use of military force. And it's another example of Donald Trump breaking laws within the United States, giving no justification for his action. All that we've heard so far is that he might be relying on the 9/11 authorization for the use of military force, and that is outrageous.
Totally outrageous. Totally outrageous. Oh my gosh. This is where the Senate is going to sign into chat and demand its authority back. Okay. Sure. All right. I do not believe you. I don't believe you. Senator Mark Warner of Virginia doing the same routine. He says the Senate should have been briefed about this strike on a drug vessel. Again, Trump has a unique gift for drawing the worst out of his opponents. It's truly amazing.
We have not been briefed on this. This was a DOD. It was not an Intel project. It was a DOD project. But my fear is there are still international laws of the sea about how the process of interdicting these kind of boats. There's supposed to be a firing of a warning shot. You're supposed to try to take it peacefully. Mm-hmm. My understanding, this boat, none of those procedures were followed.
Oh, no. None of the procedures were followed to help the Tren de Aragua members. Again, you want to make the case that, they should have followed those procedures and they could have followed. Okay, but is this like a national emergency? Oh, no, the president blew up a bunch of drug traffickers. I don't think so. Now, with that said, one of the questions that I have about the blowing up of the Tren de Aragua boat, which I'm totally fine with, in every possible way that it is possible to be fine with this, I'm fine with this, is whether it is actually a sort of kinetic action designed in the absence of a national strategy. One of the things I've been watching with the foreign policy of the Trump administration so far, which in some areas has been really good. I think in the Middle East, obviously Trump has been the best president in the Middle East in my lifetime, bar none. Easy to see from his Saudi forays to his attempts to draw a common cause with Bahrain and UAE, to his attempts to broker peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan, to obviously his support for Israel and its war against its terrorist neighbors. I think he's been fantastic there. When it comes to Ukraine and Russia, I think the president has come around more and more to the correct position on that. When it comes to global orientation, however, it seems that the Trump administration is ceding more and more ground because of these tariff wars to China and Russia. And that is a real problem. I was looking at a global map recently, and what you see is that China and Russia actually are spreading their influence operations all the way from China in the east, all the way across to Turkey in the west. Their ally Russia has been attempting to make moves on its own borders, obviously not just in Ukraine, but also in Georgia, in Kazakhstan. They're trying to make some moves now in Moldova. You're seeing that Russia, China are trying to make inroads with India. They're trying to make common cause with many, many countries in Africa. And of course, they have solid ties with regimes like Brazil, like Lula in Brazil. And so whether the United States likes it or not, we are involved in a geopolitical competition with China and Russia. And if we decide to withdraw from the world and simply blow up cartel boats as sort of our defense mechanism, that is not going to be enough. It is not going to be enough because it turns out that geopolitics is about the entire geo. It's about like the entire world. It's not just about the Caribbean Sea and small drug boats that are traveling. And so if blowing up a drug boat is sort of the muscular, look at us, we're tough response to greater and greater Chinese encroachments against Taiwan, greater and greater Chinese encroachments in the Philippines, if that's our response, that is not sufficient. There's a point that's been being made by the Wall Street Journal that I think is correct on Friday, pointing out that actually the United States is not spending nearly enough on our military. All right, coming up, President Trump getting ready to activate the military in Chicago. Maybe, kind of, not really. Plus, Isabelle Brown has signed up. She has a brand new show here at Daily Wire. She'll be joining the show to explain in a moment. First, since Roe versus Wade was overturned in 2022, more than 100 abortion clinics have closed across the country. Here is the reality, however. Abortion hasn't gone away. It has actually just shifted. The abortion pill already accounts for more than 60% of all abortions. But there's hope. Every single day, Preborn is helping moms choose life, rescuing about 200 babies every day by simply loving mothers and showing them their child through an ultrasound. When a mom sees her baby and hears that tiny heartbeat, everything changes. Here's how you can be part of this. Just $28 provides an ultrasound for a mom in need. Think about that. Less than the cost of dinner out. You could give a mom the chance to choose a life of love for her baby. So I'm asking you personally, will you join me in this mission? There's nothing more important. Visit preborn.com/Ben or simply dial pound 250 on your phone and say keyword baby. That's preborn.com/Ben or dial pound 250 keyword baby. Together, we can help save lives. One mother, one baby, one story at a time. Again, you're not going to do anything else more important today this year, probably ever, than helping the unborn. Visit preborn.com/Ben or dial pound 250 on your phone and say keyword baby. Also, feeling overwhelmed by those back taxes? You're not alone. Maybe you missed that April deadline or your financial records are all over the place. Whatever the situation, don't put it off any longer. The IRS isn't getting any friendlier. Those penalties, they pile up fast. We're talking 5% every month you don't file, maxing out at 25%, and that adds up really quickly. Here's the thing. You don't have to handle this alone. Tax Network USA specializes in exactly these situations. They've worked with thousands of Americans, employees, small business owners, people who haven't filed in years. Messy books, they've literally seen it all. They know how to sort it out. What sets them apart is their direct access to IRS programs most people don't even know exist. Plus, they have expert negotiators who actually know how to get results. They'll start with a free consultation to assess your situation. If you qualify, they might be able to reduce or even eliminate what you owe. More importantly, they can protect you from the really scary stuff like wage garnishments and bank levies. The bottom line, don't wait for that next IRS letter to show up in your mailbox. The sooner you act, the more options you'll have. Call 800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Shapiro to talk to a real expert at Tax Network USA. Take the pressure off. Let Tax Network USA handle your tax issues. The United States spent 16.9% of its economy on defense in 1952 during the Korean War, north of 8% during Vietnam. After the explosion of government domestic spending on healthcare, retirement, education, and much more, the Pentagon gets 3% of GDP. The Bipartisan Commission on National Defense Strategy said last year the United States last fought a global conflict during World War II, which ended nearly 80 years ago. The nation was last prepared for such a fight during the Cold War, which ended 35 years ago today. It is not prepared. The commission said the U.S. needs a military that's capable of fighting in more than one theater at once, not because we want to fight, but because if you want to drive other people off the ball and ensure that they don't start a fight, you have to make sure that they understand they will lose. According to the Wall Street Journal, leaks to the press suggest that President Trump's not-so-new War Department, because they're renaming the Department of Defense the Department of War, which, by the way, I like, is about to roll out a strategy that won't come close to that standard. It might put controlling the southern border ahead of deterring China, which, again, we should close the southern border. But that is a domestic law enforcement priority in many ways, as opposed to, for example, the Department of Defense, right? The Department of Homeland Security is where much of our border control resides. Whether President Trump truly believes in a broad American retreat from the world isn't clear, but his Pentagon is presiding over one. And again, that seems correct to me. It seems like the Elbridge Colby wing of the Defense Department and some allies in the White House are pushing an American withdrawal from the globe. And what that means is a stronger Russia and a stronger China. It means giving up territory. It means giving up shipping lanes. And that has real ramifications. And so again, I'm very much fine with the President of the United States blowing drug boats out of the water. But what really needs to happen is a much more aggressive defense of American interests. That doesn't mean war. Again, that means making sure that everyone knows that we will use methods at our disposal ranging from technological dissemination to economic power to the credible threat of military force to prevent our adversaries from gaining global control. Russia certainly has not been deterred at this point. Over the weekend, Russia struck Ukraine with the largest aerial bombardment of the 3.5-year war, hitting a government building in the heart of the capital for the first time. Russia fired 13 missiles and launched more than 800 attack drones, according to the Wall Street Journal, according to Ukraine's Air Force, a record for the number of drones it has directed at Ukraine in a single night. Air defenses intercepted 4 of the missiles and nearly 500 of the drones. The attack, targeting cities and towns across the country, killed a young woman and her 2-month-old child in the capital, according to Kyiv's mayor. It also struck the Ukrainian cabinet of ministers, a government building located in an area of the capital that is one of the most protected by air defenses. So, apparently, photos posted by the Ukrainian Prime Minister, Yulia Shrivenko, show a damaged roof and the top 2 floors of the hulking half-crescent building located not far from the presidential offices. Vladimir Zelensky keeps pointing out that survival is basically the goal for Ukraine at this point. Here was Zelensky over the weekend.
Did he occupy it?
No.
It mean that he didn't win. It means that we have Ukraine.
But he still wants to win.
Yes, but till he didn't occupy us, we win. And I think so, because we have our country. And of course, he understands it very clearly. He wants, of course, to occupy us totally. For him, this victory.
Okay, so obviously Zelensky is correct about this. This is Putin's goal. And this is why the United States should, in fact, be facilitating the shipment of armaments to the Ukrainians capable of allowing them to make sufficient pushback to get Putin to the table. Putin obviously believes that if he pushes hard enough, he is going to be able to get the kind of settlement that he wants that leaves Ukraine vulnerable to further invasions or to the possibility of a sort of Russian pushover election in Ukraine that ends with a Russia-friendly Ukraine, as opposed to a Western-friendly Ukraine. This is the priority. And the West should know that, just as the West should understand that China's goal in its entire geopolitical strategy is to gain more power at the expense of the United States, very clearly. Now, what that means, first and foremost, is that President Trump should be focusing on the economy. Because if the economy goes south, then forget about everything else. The economic power of the United States, which backs the military wherewithal of the United States and also prevents Democrats who would love to surrender the globe to the Chinese and the Russians from taking over. The economy must remain strong. Well, at the end of last week, there was a jobs report that was quite weak. That jobs report suggested that there had been essentially a small increase in the unemployment rate, but basically no job growth for the last several months because there was revision downward. That job report, again, underscores the idea that there should be interest rate drops, but it does not mean the economy is booming for sure. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and remember, this is Trump's new Bureau of Labor Statistics. He fired the head of the BLS. The economy added only 22,000 jobs in August. The unemployment rate rose slightly to 4.3%. The revised data showed employment actually fell by 13,000 in June. That is the first net loss of jobs since the end of 2020 when the pandemic was raging. Some of that is undoubtedly the tariff wars. Some of that is just generalized uncertainty about the direction of the economy. And certainly the idea the economy is booming right now is not true. The PE ratios in the stock market are incredibly high, meaning the price to earnings ratios. That means that people are essentially overpaying for stocks. That is particularly true at the top end of the tech market. I speak with many of the tech leaders in this space. Even they believe that a lot of these stock prices are inflated. Well, Kristen Welker had on Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, who may be the man standing between America and economic downturn, and confronted him over the poor jobs report. Here's what he had to say.
Let me drill down a little bit more on these numbers, Mr. Secretary. The president said that these tariffs are going to spark a manufacturing renaissance, he called it. But since he announced them in April, the U.S. has actually lost 42,000 manufacturing jobs. Are these numbers proof that the tariffs are failing to produce the manufacturing jobs that President Trump promised?
Again, Kristen, it's been a couple of months, and with the manufacturing sector, as you know, we can't snap our fingers and have factories built. So what we are seeing is a record amount of investment intentions. We've seen a CapEx boom in the first half of the year, and I think that was actually held back. The One Big Beautiful Bill, which has full expensing for factories and equipment, was passed on July 4th. Many companies were holding back then. So we are going to see construction jobs and we're going to see manufacturing jobs.
Okay, so he says there's going to be a manufacturing uptick. There has not been a manufacturing uptick, largely because many of the manufacturing centers in the United States, guess what they use to make their products? Imports. A good case in point of this, by the way, is what just happened over at Hyundai. So the United States had made a deal with South Korea on trade, and Hyundai had announced that they were going to be building new factories in the United States. And this was touted by the administration as a giant win. What actually happened? Well, it turns out that Hyundai went to a subcontractor. That subcontractor found illegal South Korean labor and was using illegal South Korean labor to lower the labor costs. Because when you artificially boost the prices in one area, i.e. labor, then either the company has to raise prices, making it less competitive, or they're going to seek another way out. That is not trying to get Hyundai off the hook. If they violated the law, then they should pay for it. And people who are here illegally should, in fact, be deported. It is to point out there are downstream ramifications of economic policies like trade restrictionism. This has also created a bit of a political crisis between the United States and South Korea. According to the Wall Street Journal, South Korea and the U.S. have reached a deal to release Korean citizens who were detained last week in a large-scale immigration raid at a Hyundai motor plant in Georgia, according to the office of the South Korean president. Apparently, it's unclear whether the detained South Koreans are allowed to leave voluntarily or if they're going to be deported. If you're deported, then that means that you're banned from re-entering the United States for many years. No criminal charges have been filed at this point. Apparently, most of these people were visa holders who overstayed their visas. That makes you an illegal immigrant, obviously. None of the detainees were directly employed by Hyundai, according to the company. LG Energy, which is the subcontractor, said 47 of its employees had been arrested, as well as 250 workers at subcontracted companies. It also said it was halting most business trips to the United States and directing employees on assignment to the U.S. to return home immediately or remain in their accommodations because they're afraid that their employees presumably are going to get caught up in some sort of dragnet here. But these are the unintended consequences of tariff policies and immigration policies. What you end up with, I mean, the goal of them is to artificially increase the price of labor above what it normally would be in a free-flowing market. And when that happens, people might try to escape the rules, which is what happened with Hyundai. Again, they violated the law. They should face whatever punishment they're supposed to face. But just be aware, there's going to be an inefficiency in the market, which means higher prices for your cars. And then, because it costs more, there'll be a slump in demand. That is typically what happens with the tariffs, is there's an adjustment up in price followed by a slump in demand because the prices are too high. Well, Scott Bessent is maintaining that companies are saying the tariffs are helping their business. This is not actually, I think, by the data true. By the data, most companies, particularly in the manufacturing sector, have been saying actually it's harming their business.
At Treasury, we have about 2 management teams come through a day, and overwhelmingly, we are hearing from companies they plan to increase CapEx, they plan to increase employment. We are seeing what's going to be a record amount of foreign direct investment. And for every John Deere, we have companies who are telling us the tariffs have helped our business, we're increasing CapEx, and we're going to increase employment.
Okay, so again, it may be helping this is what happens. Tariffs have specific benefits at the expense of broad costs. There may be a couple of companies that benefit. There are going to be a lot of companies that do not. And consumers broadly are going to have to pay the price for that. In fact, there was a survey done just a couple of weeks ago by Industry Week that was pointing out that nearly 70% of business leaders who responded to Endeavor Business Intelligence early this month said the trade measures imposed by the Trump administration, as well as some retaliatory actions by trading partners, are significantly affecting their operations. Another 8% say the impact is starting to be felt now. Only 19% of executives say they don't expect any sort of significant impact here. And again, manufacturing has not increased because of this. The truth is, once again, manufacturing has declined in the United States as a result of labor costs being too high and technology replacing many of these jobs. The reality is that it's not that we shipped all the jobs to China, it's that technology took a huge swath of manufacturing jobs, which is why manufacturing output in the United States is basically increased. It's been on the increase for the last 20 years. Manufacturing employment has been going down because machines are doing more than human beings used to do. Well, Scott Bessent is very worried, apparently, about the idea that the Supreme Court may strike down the tariffs. Remember, a federal appellate court has held that Trump's tariffs are actually unconstitutional, which, by the way, they are. Okay, I'm just going to say it. It's true. Article 1 gives tariff power to the Congress. It does not give unilateral, broad-scale national emergency tariff power to the President of the United States based on trade deficits. This was always poorly predicated in terms of its legality. My guess is the Supreme Court will strike down the tariffs on the basis of a violation of the Article 1 powers granted to Congress and not to the President. Scott Bessent points out that this would have some pretty negative ramifications for the economy because many of the billions of dollars that have been taken in through tariffs would then have to be refunded to the companies that were paying the tariffs. Okay, but you know what else it would do? It would ensure that manufacturers aren't paying inflated prices, that consumers aren't paying inflated prices, that efficiencies go back on the table, and maybe Congress should get back involved. Again, if Congress wants to tariff the living hell out of China, or if the president wants to do so, using national security rationales, that's fine. Tariffing India and Vietnam for the same rationales makes no sense at all.
I am confident that we will win at the Supreme Court, but there are numerous other avenues that we can take. They diminish President Trump's negotiating position, but there are numerous in terms of, and remember, this isn't about the dollars, this is about balance. The dollars are an after amount.
Would you offer rebates, though? Are you prepared to offer rebates?
So we would have to give a refund on about half the tariffs, which would be terrible for the Treasury.
And you're prepared to give those refunds?
Well, I mean, there's no be prepared. If the court says it, we'd have to do it.
Okay, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Honestly, the best thing that could happen for the Trump economy right now is a lower interest rate by the Federal Reserve and the tariffs going away. That'd be the best thing for the economy. If both those things happen, then what you'll end up with is actually a consumer and investment boom. So maybe that's going to happen in quarter 4. It definitely could. I mean, Scott Bessent has been saying the stock market is doing great. That is his evidence that things are going well. Here he was.
You're taking these from earnings calls, and on earnings calls, they have to give the draconian scenario. There aren't companies coming out and saying, oh, because of the tariffs, we're doing this. But I can tell you that whether it's Micron or Apple, they are upping their investments in the United States. And, Chris, if things are so bad, why was the GDP 3.3%? Why is the stock market at a new high? Because, with President Trump, we care both about big companies and small companies. And you're quoting big companies, but the big company index, the S&P, is at a new high.
So the real question to be asked here is whether President Trump is sort of outperforming what otherwise would have been. And the answer is not really at this point. And that's largely, again, because of the tariffs and the roiling in the economy. So I asked our friends and sponsors over at Comment, what was the S&P 500 on January 21st, 2025? And what is it today? If we use the rate of increase in the S&P 500 between January 21st, 2021, when Joe Biden took office, and January 21st, 2025, how high would the S&P 500 have been if it had continued growing at that rate? So in other words, is President Trump's rate of growth in the S&P 500 higher or less high or the same as it was when Joe Biden was president of the United States? And the answer is, on January 21st, 2025, the S&P 500 closed at 6,049.24. As of today, the S&P 500 is 6,481.50. If the index had continued growing at the same annual rate observed from January 21st, 2021 to January 21st, 2025, it would now be approximately 6,495.41. So basically the same. The answer is essentially the same. And that's what Comment says. If the S&P 500 had continued at this compound annual growth rate, the expected value for September 8th, 2025 would be, again, that 6,495 as opposed to 6,481. So the actual index is very close to the projected value, indicating similar growth behavior over the analyzed period. Here's the thing. Trump is better for the economy than Joe Biden. So the only thing that's been holding this back is the roiling economic turmoil because of things like tariffs. Already coming up, Democrats are still trying to figure out what to do about Trump, and they're looking forward to 2028. Is that why Bernie Sanders is campaigning with AOC and Zoran Mamdani? Plus, we will be joined by Isabelle Brown, our brand new host here at Daily Wire. First, did you know roughly 36% of Americans have below average credit scores, which can make borrowing more difficult and expensive? That means home loans, cars, and more. They're just continually out of reach. That's where Kickoff can help. Users with credit under 600 grew an average of 84 points in their first year with on-time payments. You can start building your credit right away for just $1 in your first month. The best part, AutoPay takes care of everything automatically, so you're building credit even while you sleep without ever having to worry about missing a payment. The whole sign-up process only takes a few minutes right from your phone. There's no credit check required. You can cancel it whenever you want. No wonder it's the #1 credit builder on the App Store. Start building credit with Kickoff today. You get your first month for as little as $1. That's 80% off the normal price when you go to getkickoff.com/Shapiro today. That's Kickoff without the C. Get KIKOFF.com/Shapiro. Must sign up via getkickoff.com/Shapiro to activate offer. Offer applies to new Kickoff customers first month only, subject to approval. Offer subject to change. Average first-year credit score impact of plus 84 points. Vantage score 3.0 between January 2023 and January 2024 for Kickoff credit account users who started with a score below 600, who paid on time, and who had no delinquencies or collections added to their credit profile during the period. Late payments may negatively impact your credit score. Individual results may vary. Well, meanwhile, the situation in Chicago continues to percolate. The president of the United States sent a meme over the weekend that got people very upset. If you keep falling for his memes, I'm sorry, but I don't know what to tell you. The guy loves memes, okay? The president of the United States loves the memes. He doesn't mean he's going to napalm Chicago. Somebody put up a meme of Trump as Robert Duvall in Apocalypse Now. You know, like the helicopters in the background and the napalm explosions and everything. And it said, Chipocalypse Now, meaning like Chicago apocalypse. And President Trump said, I love the smell of deportations in the morning. Chicago about to find out why it's called the Department of War. Okay, this is total trolling, obviously. He's not going to declare war on Chicago. He's not escape from New York. He's not going to start nuking parts of Chicago. Napalm is not going to fall into the center of the loop. This is not a thing. But, of course, this set Democrats off. Of course. Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland, who, by the way, over the weekend announced he's not going to run for president in 2028. We'll get to that in a minute because it's kind of fascinating. Here he was. Not running for president, but still being on the national news show, saying it's embarrassing that Trump would send such a thing.
I call it embarrassing. I would call it performative. And I do want to be clear about some of the stats. When people talk about how we've watched a decrease because of the National Guard, let's be clear about some of the stats. That the National Guard are responsible during this occupation for 744 cubic yards of mulch spread, 886 bags of trash collected, 270 feet of fence painted. You know what we don't have stats on? How many illegal guns has the National Guard seized? How many drug busts has the National Guard done?
Okay, well, what we do know is that the crime rates have declined markedly in Washington, D.C. because the National Guard is on the street. President Trump was asked about whether he's going to actually go to war with Chicago. This is like red meat to President Trump. It's just catnip. He throws out chum in the water, and the sharks come, and then he just goes fishing. So here we go, the press pretending they think that Trump is going to declare war on the city of Chicago.
Are you trying to go to war with Chicago?
Fake news. When you say that, darling, that's fake news.
Well, why
I
would
don't
the
go to
Department
war.
of Defense?
Listen, be quiet. Listen. You don't listen. You never listen. That's why you're second rate. We're not going to war. We're going to clean up our city. We're going to clean them up so they don't kill 5 people every weekend. That's not war. That's common sense.
Okay, again, they're just playing right into his hands with this sort of stuff. Tom Homan, the borders are, he says, what we actually are going to be doing is we're going to be going into sanctuary cities with ICE and, actually policing the law. Here was Tom Homan on with Jake Tapper at CNN explaining ICE agents will be flooding the zone.
Governor Pritzker's been notified from day one. Again, I went there and started an operation right after the inauguration. ICE agents have been flooding the zone in Chicago for a while now. So he's aware of what's going on. I mean, he knows we've been there. We were there last week. We were there the week before. Now, again, we're going to send additional resources to all sanctuary cities. But this isn't new to him. He knows we've been there, and he's failed to work with us.
Okay, so he is right about this, obviously. And if Democrats wish to take the other side of this, they're going to lose. So what are Democrats going to do? Well, some of them are just going to pray that President Trump dies. Eli Mistal over at MSNBC literally said that over the weekend. He said that he's praying for Trump to die, which is a hell of a dig.
I'm not a praying man, but I pray for the last cheeseburger, right? The big cheeseburger in the sky to come and rid us of this problem.
Literally praying for the death of the president. So that's solid stuff there on the Dean Obadiah show on Sirius XM. Meanwhile, Gavin Newsom is trying to set himself up for a run, obviously, against whoever the Republican nominee is in 2028. He says, our economy is in a downward spiral, but don't worry, the GOP are spending their time cheersing Diet Cokes, cheersing, I don't know what that means, at a new exclusive club. So he calls it the Rose Garden Club, is I guess what it is now called over there. He says it's turning into a Mar-a-Lago over at the White House, and the economy is going down. Wes Moore, again, I think that Wes Moore is one of the better candidates in the Democratic pantheon. That doesn't mean he's like an amazing, amazing candidate, but if you take a look at the Democratic primaries and the black population in South Carolina, which is extraordinarily important in a Democratic primary, Wes Moore had an upper hand there, and he says he's not running in 2028. Now, maybe all that's talk. Maybe he's lying because he's running for re-elect as governor of Maryland. He doesn't want to leave the door open to the possibility he's defeated because he is actually putting his eyes on the top prize. But he did say over and over and over here he's not running for president in 2028.
Do you rule out a run for president, Governor?
Yeah, I'm not running for president.
You rule it out?
Yes, I'm
You
not running for
completely
president.
rule it out?
I'm so excited about what we're doing, that we've gone from 43rd in the country in unemployment to now one of the lowest unemployment rates. We've had amongst the fastest drops in violent crime anywhere in the United States of America. Our population is growing. Maryland is moving. And so I'm really excited about going back in front of the people of my state and asking for another term.
And so, it'll be fascinating to see if that's true, if he's not running, who's left. So Newsom, obviously. But then you have the Sanders-Mamdani AOC wing. And they were all campaigning together over the weekend. This is why I say the economy must maintain. Because if the economy does not maintain, what happens next is really, really ugly. What happens next is the rise of the Sanders movement on the left. So the fighting oligarchy chant, it doesn't make a lot of sense to people right now. It just sounds silly. But if the economy starts to go into serious recession, and if the only people who have made money over the course of the past couple of years are people in the tech bubble, that's going to be a real problem for Republicans, like a serious problem. So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Zoran Mamdani, and Bernie Sanders all went to Astoria on Saturday, and then they took a picture in a cafe. I have no idea who paid for lunch. I can assume no one. They will bill the taxpayer, I assume. Bernie Sanders then said he would not allow Elon Musk to become the world's first trillionaire. First of all, why is that up to Bernie the useless piece of, Bernie's the worst. Bernie is just a leech on the ass of society. That's all he is. He has been this for 80 long years, a leech sucking the blood out of the ass of society. It's just amazing that this person is considered a useful person when he is legitimately one of the most counterproductive Americans ever born. Truly. Here he is explaining he's not going to allow Musk to become the first trillionaire as though he has some sort of magical ability to downgrade the stock value of Tesla.
We are living in crazy world. Millions of people struggling to put food on the table, and making one guy a trillionaire is insane. Not what this country is supposed to be about, and we are not going to allow that to happen.
We're not going to allow anybody to be so rich because we need more poor people. That's what we need. Zero-sum thinking at its finest. He says people should be jumping up and down in support of Zoran Mamdani. This is why when people say personal irritation, when people trot Bernie Sanders out, like, well, you know, he is Jewish. So what he says about the Middle East, Bernie Sanders is as Jewish as a ham sandwich. He has nothing to do with Judaism. Nothing. He was born into a Jewish family, and that's it. That's the whole thing. Otherwise, zip, zilch, zero. Him speaking on behalf of Judaism is the same as me speaking on behalf of Islam. We have pretty much the same relationship with those respective religions. Well, here's Bernie Sanders.
I find it hard to understand how the major Democratic leaders in New York State are not supporting the Democratic candidate. One might think that if a candidate starting at 2% in the polls gets 50,000 volunteers, creates enormous excitement, gets young people involved in the political process, gets non-traditional voters to vote, Democratic leaders will be jumping up and down. This is our guy.
Well, so what does Zoran Mamdani have to say that is so valuable? Well, I mean, he says that he's still in favor of government-run grocery stores because while they've never worked anywhere, this time they definitely will.
You know, I say to that example, as well as the examples of our own failures as city government right here in New York City, that we have to prove not only the efficacy, but the excellence of this idea. Because for every one example that you can point to, there's another of another municipality today considering opening a city-run grocery store. But to me, the most important thing is the outcome. This is something I believe will work. We will bring the best and the brightest to deliver it. And it will be 5 stores at the cost of $60 million, which is less than half the city is already spending on subsidizing corporate supermarkets.
Oh, that's just yeah, it'll work this time. Socialism has never been tried. Also, he says, well, he's asked, how are you going to get, rich people on board so that they don't leave the city? And he's like, because they will recognize that when we seize all their wealth and execute them, their lives too have become better.
We have a number of New Yorkers who are doing quite well. The top 1% of New York City earns $1 million or more a year. And my vision is not one where they leave, it is one where they stay. It is
How do you get them to stay?
In part by showing them that asking them to pay more in taxes would increase even their quality of life. Because when you ask New Yorkers, what is it that is making them feel uneasy in this city? You often hear from them about the cleanliness of our city, the safety of our city, the affordability of our city. We are not asking to raise these taxes for the sake of it. We're asking so that we can actually make the slowest buses in the country fast and free, so that we can actually create a Department of Community Safety that would deploy dedicated teams of mental health outreach workers to the top 100 stations of the highest levels of mental health crises and homelessness. That relationship proving that tax dollar leads to that investment.
Yes, I'm sure that's going to prevent people from leaving your city as you completely destroy their businesses. I'm sure that will do it. Your magical capacity to run the largest city on planet Earth in terms of commerce is going to be so great that all the rich people are going to just allow you to suck money out of their bank account, destroy their incomes, and also rent control everything inside. Yes, I'm sure it'll all work out great. Maybe this time when you try socialism, it will totally work. Well, as you know, we here at Daily Wire, we are celebrating our 10th anniversary, and we figured there's no better way for us to celebrate our 10th anniversary than bringing aboard somebody who is already a star, but is going to be a gigantic star in the media landscape. And that person, of course, is Isabelle Brown. Her Isabelle Brown show launches today. We could not be more pumped about this. You are going to love it. She's not just doing politics. She's doing culture and everything in between. Isabelle, thanks so much for taking the time and congratulations.
Thank you so much for having me, Ben. We've been incredibly hard at work with all the bells and whistles, and we're so excited for the day to finally be here.
So why don't we start by introducing you to the audience? Like, who are you and why should people listen to the show?
I'm so excited to get to know the Daily Wire community a little bit better over the next few months and to bring my existing following as well to our amazing family across the network. I've been working in political commentary and social media and the heart of the culture movement really by happenstance since I was a college student on my campus at Colorado State University. I set out to do my career as a surgeon hopeful studying biomedical sciences and found very quickly that even my classes like human gross anatomy and physiology and organic chemistry really weren't about what I thought science had a foundation in, that pursuit of objective truth, but instead was a lot more political propaganda than anything else. I became a student activist on my college campus, hosting speaking events with conservative speakers and handing out socialism sucks buttons as a Turning Point USA chapter president from 2015 to 2019. And just as COVID started to hit and thrust our entire generation into the digital space, started experimentally posting as a social media content creator. And a few years later, God has just totally transformed my life. I obviously didn't end up going to medical school. I have the chance to do media every day as a career. But I like to think that it's still based in that pursuit of objective truth and sharing it with others the same way I loved as a scientist.
Well, again, we are so excited to be launching this show with you, especially because, again, we're bringing new things in the second decade of Daily Wire. Why don't you introduce people to what the first episode is going to be? What kind of stuff are people going to be getting from the show?
Great question. And it's something that's been sitting with me for a long time. How do we want to launch this show appropriately? I don't know about you, Ben, but as a creator and as a commentator myself, I have felt incredibly burnt out over the last few years of the constant cycle we often see in the conservative movement's media of just picking from obscurity the most random, insane left-wing video we see on TikTok or Instagram or Twitter and reacting to it and saying, hey, this thing over here is really, really bad, and just continuing to manufacture outrage. I don't like looking at those views anymore. I don't like enjoying that part of the commentary anymore. And I'm just finding that even in the wake of the 2024 election last November, and we have a small victory in front of us, we still haven't won the culture war, but we're acting like the battle is over. So what we really need more than anything else is an optimistic view forward. Now that we have this chance right in front of us to transform society for the better forever, to embrace what is good and true and beautiful, what does that actually look like? What is a new blueprint for the next generation? And how can we build a new American dream? So we cover how the heck did we get here with the very strategic playbook of the left that's been operational, largely driven by the Communist Party for the last 60 plus years. And now what the heck do we do with it and take that first step forward together in our first episode today?
So, Isabelle, unlike me, you are a big advocate for Generation Z. You say that Generation Z could be the most conservative generation that we've seen. As you know, I've become a crotchety old. I was a crotchety old man when I was 20, and I'm a crotchety old man when I'm 40. And I hate to think what it'll be like when I'm 80, when I'm actually old. But let's talk about your view of Generation Z, because it is different, and you're seeing changes in the culture for young people that are hopeful, actually.
I am. I see it every single day, Ben, starting when I was just a college student as a Gen Zer on my own campus and now interacting with millions of Gen Zers, not just in America, but across Western civilization in the digital space today. I didn't get a lot of love for being the Gen Z apologist over the last few years, and in fact have been laughed off set at Fox News and Newsmax and just about everywhere else with this rose-colored glasses idea that this next generation really is going to save our country. But I fundamentally do believe it. You're watching Gen Z not just become overwhelmingly culturally conservative, but also politically conservative. As we know from this last election cycle, it was Gen Z decisively that delivered the victory for President Donald Trump, thanks to mostly TikTok trends and Instagram videos. But I think that cultural piece is really the most fascinating concept of all of this. 93%, according to Newsweek, of Gen Zers want to get married. We're having children younger. We're embracing religion when no one expected us ever to, in a very traditional sense, rooted in tradition traditional Christianity and other religious traditions across our country. There's a resurgence of free speech, as we even talk about on the show today. Look at what's happening in Temecula Valley School District in California when grown adults are trying to say that you are mentally unstable as a child, girl, if you don't want boys in your locker room. Middle school girls are walking out of their classroom this week with big giant signs that say no boys in girls' spaces. There really does seem to be a sense of moral clarity and a hunger, not just for conservative ideas, but objective truth in this next generation, and wanting to build a future that we can be proud to call home again and share with every generation that comes after us.
Now, folks, you can see why Isabelle Brown is going to be the newest star with Daily Wire Plus. Go check out Daily Wire Plus right now. You can also get her show anywhere you download podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Go check her out right now. Today is day one, so be on board from the very beginning. Isabelle, again, congratulations and welcome to the big time.
Thank you so much, Ben. Excited to be here.
The reason that Daily Wire Plus is launching this show is because we believe in Isabelle and all of the principles she stands for. She's a fresh perspective, fearless commentary on the toughest political and cultural topics, awesome insights you're not going to hear anywhere else. Isabelle is determined to go on offense to save the West and help build a new American dream for her generation, the Utes. That forward-looking vision is exactly what we actually all need right now. It's a rallying call for young conservatives to not just defend our values, but to actively shape the future. So don't miss her debut episode. It's airing today. Be there from day one. Join me in giving Isabelle a big Daily Wire welcome. Follow her, watch the show, get ready. The next generation of conservative commentary has arrived. Alrighty, folks, the show is continuing for our members right now. There's a terrorist attack in Israel, and Tucker Carlson has some fascinating words about Hamas. No one could have predicted this except for everyone who's been watching Tucker over the course of the last couple of years. Remember, in order to watch, you have to be a member. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click the link in the description and join us.